High cattle futures are way down, unprofitable right now. And guys, basically what they're saying is that the aid to the feedlots is capped at a point now that it is, many of them may go bankrupt. And so we will eventually perhaps have a meat shortage.
The world's biggest meat companies like Smithfield and Tyson Foods are shutting down their slaughterhouses and processing plants across the U.S., meaning Patterson's hogs may be left to face a very different fate, being euthanized for no reason other than having nowhere else to go.
At least 13 different meat production facilities had to shut their doors since March as a result of this COVID-19 pandemic. Tyson announcing last week that it would be closing its largest pork processing facility in Iowa and a plant in Indiana. The company also closed a beef processing plant in Washington.
In the last 5 years, I would have had well over 1,000 separate inquiries from 50 plus countries looking for everything from meat's the main one, meat's 90% of the inquiries, but then you go into live export, you go into wool, you go into milk, you go into the hump fat and all those sorts of things come from that. So there's numerous aspects of the camel and numerous countries that want camel meat.
Tonight, killer hornets invading the U.S. and Canada. Asian giant hornets, also known as murder hornets, spotted in Washington state, and they prey on honeybees that pollinate much of our food.
A pack of jackals eat dog food that was left for them by an Israeli woman at Hyrcan Park in Tel Aviv, Israel, April 11, 2020. A wild boar roams the street of the Carmel neighborhood in the northern city of Haifa, Israel, April 11, 2020. With Dubai shops closed and almost no people on the streets, peacocks that normally live in nearby gardens ventured out to explore the other areas of the Middle Eastern city. An approximately one-year-old puma roams the streets of Santiago on March 24, 2020. Which, according to the Agricultural and Livestock Service, came down from the nearby mountains in search of food as fewer people are on the streets due to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. A sea lion is seen on the sidewalk of Mar del Plata harbor during the COVID-19 lockdown, some 400 km south of Buenos Aires, Argentina, on April 16, 2020. Thousands of birds flock to Agua Dulce Beach now, largely absent of beachgoers in Lima, Peru, March 24th, 2020. The birds began swarming the empty shores since Peru's president declared a state of emergency and ordered people to stay home because of the spread of COVID-19. A raccoon walks an almost deserted Central Park, April 16, 2020 in New York City. The movie theater was closed in Westbury, New York on March 20th, leaving the parking lot empty for Canadian geese to roam. A coyote stands by the roadside as the spread of the coronavirus pandemic continues at Golden Gate Bridge View Vista Point across from San Francisco, April 7th, 2020. A coyote stood outside Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles on April 3rd, weeks after Major League Baseball suspended all play. Mountain goats from the streets of Anduno on March 31st, 2020. The goats normally live on the rocky Great Orme, but occasional visitors to the seaside town, they've been drawn by the lack of people during the coronavirus lockdown. Fallow deer from Dagenham Park rest and graze on the grass outside homes on a housing estate in Harrow Hill, near Romford, England, on April 2nd, 2020. The semi-urban deer are a regular sight, but as the roads have become quieter due to the nationwide lockdown, the deer have staked a claim on new territories in the vicinity. A wild fox roamed the empty streets of London on the night of March 28th. 5 female roe deer and a young fawn roam on a nearly empty sidewalk in Zakopane, southern Poland, April 16th, 2020. On March 30th, ducks ventured across the street in the heart of Paris, which is typically bustling with traffic. On April 5th, 2 cows strolled on a Corsican beach usually popular with tourists. It was the 20th day of a strict shutdown in France. Black kites sit on the goalpost of an open playfield during the 28th day of a nationwide lockdown in Kathmandu, Nepal, April 20th, 2020. While people are not able to congregate in public, animals have been sighted more frequently in those unused open spaces. Monkeys climb on a car as they are being fed with potatoes by a resident at Oud Village, March 25th, 2020. Macaques searched for food around the closed stalls of the Johari Bazaar in Jaipur, India, on March 26th. During the lockdown, the marketplace was deserted. A flock of geese searched for food inside a temple in Nagaon, in India's state of Assam, on April 3rd. A woman watches monkeys as they search for food in front of a shop in front of Prang Sam Yod Temple in Lopburi, Thailand, March 17th, 2020. A newly hatched baby leatherback sea turtle makes its way to the sea for the first time at a beach in Phang Nga district, Thailand, March 27, 2020. On April 1st, cattle looked for food in Palu, central Sulawesi, in Indonesia, as the government told its people to avoid public spaces. Sika deer wandered over to a sushi restaurant in Nara, Japan, on March 12th, when Prime Minister Shinzo Abe declared a state of emergency for Tokyo and its surrounding regions. The number of visitors to the city of Nara dropped significantly and the deer became bolder.
A lot of the viruses that make us sick actually originate in animals. Some of the viruses that cause the flu come from birds and pigs. HIV/AIDS comes from chimpanzees. The deadly Ebola virus likely originates in bats. And in the case of the 2019 coronavirus, there's some evidence it went from a bat to a pangolin before infecting a human. While viruses are very good at jumping between species, it's rare for a deadly one to make this journey all the way to humans. That's because it would need all these hosts to encounter each other at some point. Wet markets are scattered all over the world, but the ones in China are particularly well known because they offer a wide variety of animals, including wildlife. This is a sample menu reportedly from the market in Wuhan. These animals are from all over the world, and each one has the potential to carry its own viruses to the market. The reason all these animals are in the same market is because of a decision China's government made decades ago. Back in the 1970s, China was falling apart. Famine had killed more than 36 million people, and the communist regime, which controlled all food production, was failing to feed its more than 900 million people. In 1978, on the verge of collapse, the regime gave up this control and allowed private farming. While large companies increasingly dominated the production of popular foods like pork and poultry, some smaller farmers turned to catching and raising wild animals as a way to sustain themselves.
At the very beginning, it was mostly peasant household backyard operation of turtles, for example. That's how wildlife farming started to get off the ground.
And since it started to feed and sustain people, the Chinese government backed it.
So it was imperative for the government to encourage people to make a living through whatever productive activities they can find themselves in. You can lift yourself out of poverty. No matter what you are doing, that's okay.
But then in 1988, the government made a decision that changed the shape of wildlife trade in China. They enacted the Wildlife Protection Law, which designated the animals as resources owned by the state and protected people engaged in the utilization of wildlife resources.
That's one of the most devastating problems of the law, because if you designate the wildlife as a natural resource, that means it is something you can use for human benefits.
The law also encouraged the domestication and breeding of wildlife. And with that, an industry was born. Small local farms turned into industrial-sized operations. For example, this bear farm started with just 3 and eventually grew to more than 1,000 bears. Bigger populations meant greater chances that a sick animal could spread disease. Farmers were also raising a wide variety of animals, which meant more viruses on the farms. Nonetheless, these animals were funneled into the wet markets for profit. While this legal wildlife farming industry started booming, it simultaneously provided cover for an illegal wildlife industry. Endangered animals like tigers, rhinoceroses, and pangolins were trafficked into China. By the early 2000s, these markets were teeming with wild animals when the inevitable happened. That's where the Wuhan market comes in. It's a wet market. A kind of place where live animals are slaughtered and sold for consumption.
It was not a surprise at all, and I think that it was not a surprise to many scientists.
Peter Lee is a professor and expert on China's animal trade.
The cages stacked above one over another. Animals at the bottom are often soaked with all kinds of liquid, animal excrement, pus, blood, or whatever the liquid they're receiving from the animals above.
That's exactly how a virus can jump from one animal to another. If that animal then comes in contact with or is consumed by a human, the virus could potentially infect them. And if the virus then spreads to other humans, it causes an outbreak.
The latest on the deadly SARS virus, the worldwide death toll up again today.
China has reported more than 1,400 cases of infection nationwide.
It is what health officials have feared all along.
In 2003, the SARS outbreak was traced to a wet market here in southern China. Scientists found traces of the virus in farmed civet cats. Chinese officials quickly shut down the markets and banned wildlife farming. But just a few months after the outbreak, the Chinese government declared 54 species of wildlife animals, including civet cats, legal to farm again. By 2004, the wildlife farming industry was worth an estimated 100 billion yuan, and it exerted significant influence over the Chinese government.
Wildlife farming industry was tiny in China's gigantic GDP, but the industry has enormous lobbying capability.
It's because of this influence that the Chinese government has allowed these markets to grow over the years. In 2016, for example, the government sanctioned the farming of some endangered species like tigers and pangolins. By 2018, the wildlife industry had grown to 148 billion yuan and had developed clever marketing tactics to keep the markets around.
The industry has been promoting these wildlife animals as tonic products, as bodybuilding, as sex enhancing, and of course as disease fighting. None of the claims can hold water.
Yet these products became popular with an influential portion of China's population.
The majority of the people in China do not eat wildlife animals. Those people who consume these wildlife animals are the rich and the powerful, a small minority.
It's this minority that the Chinese government chose to favor over the safety of the rest of its population.
These parochial commercial interests of small number of wildlife eaters are hijacking China's national interest.
Soon after the coronavirus outbreak, the Chinese government shut down thousands of wet markets and temporarily banned wildlife trade again. Organizations around the world have been urging China to make the ban permanent. Chinese social media, in particular, has been flooded with petitions to ban it for good this time. In response, China is reportedly amending the wildlife protection law that encouraged wildlife farming decades ago. But unless these actions lead to a permanent ban on wildlife farming, outbreaks like this one are bound to happen again.